So the main goal of the urban reforms, one of the main goals is bringing in more revenue for the government, right? And so the mining industry is going to be heavily responsible for that. So let's take a look at mining in New Spain. In particular, there was mining in other places as well, such as in the area of modern-day Bolivia, but we're going to focus on the mining in New Spain. So as we move into the 1700s, you are going to see a silver boom. So a large amount of silver is going to be coming out of the ground because of this mining industry. And part of the reason for that is better management of the mines. In addition to that, you also have the workers, the laborers in the mines receiving lower wages than they were before. And so if you're paying your workers less, that means more profit, and more of that profit can eventually make its way through taxation back to the mother country. Okay, so the workers are suffering because they get lower wages, but it's good for the Spanish crown, at least in a way, because they're receiving more of that silver. Okay. Another thing that leads to the silver boom is the reduction in the cost of mercury. Mercury was used to separate the silver from its ore. Now, the Spanish government had a monopoly on mercury. Okay, so they controlled the price of mercury, and so it was easy for them to reduce the price for the mining companies. And so if the mining companies didn't have to pay so much for mercury, they could buy more of it, and they could produce more silver, and then more of that silver could be exported to the mother country. And finally, the last thing that led to the silver boom of the 1700s going into the 1800s would be the discovery of new silver mines. One of the main mines was the mine in Valenciana in Guanajuato. This was the deepest mine in the world, producing huge amounts of silver. Another reason why the silver boom occurred was advances that took place in the mining industry. For example, you have new blasting techniques where the miners would blast underground so that they could get deeper and deeper into the mines. And once you get deeper into the mines, you're going to encounter groundwater. And so you have to find ways to get that water out of there so that you can mine for silver. And so you're going to have new water drainage techniques being utilized by the miners as well. And so these advances in mining are going to allow for the mines to go deeper and deeper into the earth so that the miners could get access to more and more silver. And so this is part of the reason why you have the silver boom going on. And so this is good for the Spanish crown because they're getting more and more silver exports. But there are some drawbacks to all these silver exports making their way back to the mother country. One of them is less liquidity in cash in New Spain itself. Okay, so it's good for the mother country. More silver is leaving New Spain and getting back to the mother country. But in New Spain, there's a problem because there's less silver in the local economy. And so that's what I mean by less liquidity. Because silver is a form of liquid cash. It's fluid, meaning it's more easy to trade silver for a number of different goods. If there's less silver in the local economy of New Spain, then that means it's a little more difficult to purchase goods. Maybe you're going to have to barter for other goods, using other goods to barter for different goods that you want to buy instead of using silver, right, which is liquid cash. It moves more freely. Okay, and so there's less liquidity because there's less silver in New Spain because more of it is being exported out to the mother country. All right, and so this is going to weaken internal trade there inside of New Spain, okay, within New Spain. And so that's a problem because before this you had a lot of the silver remaining in New Spain and was used for internal trade there. Another drawback of all this mining is going to affect the environment. Okay, you're going to have deforestation going on as you have more and more mining taking place. And part of this is because of the act of smelting. Okay, smelting is another way to separate silver from its ore. Right, this is different than the technique being used with mercury. Right, the amalgamation. And so smelting involved the use of charcoal. right? To heat up the ore and to try to separate the ore from the silver. And so you have to cut down a large amount of trees in order to make charcoal, and then use that charcoal in the smelting process to separate silver from its ore. And so this is going to lead to deforestation in areas in New Spain because they're cutting down all these trees for charcoal. Okay, so there are some drawbacks to exporting all of this silver back to the mother country. Right? So these are some of the successes and failures of the Bourbon reforms. While we're talking about the economy of New Spain, let's talk about some other important exports. You have cochineal, the red dye that we spoke about before, that was made from insects. These insects are cultivated primarily in Oaxaca, and Spain is the only empire in the world at this time that has access to cochineal, these insects, right, which you mash up to make red dye. So Spain is trying to protect their monopoly on cochineal, and so they lie about where this red dye really comes from. Okay, they'll tell foreign merchants that, oh, you know, the cochineal dye, oh, that actually comes from grains. There's a special grain in New Spain that we use to make this red dye. But really, it's coming from insects. And for a long period of time, deep into the 1700s, not until the late 1700s, the rest of the world did not know where this red dye was coming from. They didn't realize that it came from these insects out of Oaxaca, right? But eventually, the secret will come out, and the rest of the world will find out about it, and they'll be able to sneak out some of these insects and try to cultivate them themselves. Okay, so a little bit of history on cochineal, the dye there is one of the more popular exports coming from New Spain. Sugar is also being exported. There will be sugar plantations in the area of Veracruz. On these sugar plantations, you have a number of African slaves working to produce the sugar. So that's going to be another major export coming from New Spain. You also have textiles. This is cloth, and the main production of textiles is going to come from the area of Puebla. Ceramics also is another popular export coming from Puebla. And tobacco, finally, is the last of the major exports coming from New Spain. And so you'll have tobacco plantations around the area of Mexico City and Querétaro. So yes, there are some exports besides silver coming from New Spain, but primarily the production and the local economy of New Spain is really going to be focused on domestic use, okay, meaning that most of the products that are produced in New Spain will remain in New Spain. But there are some exports, and these are some examples of the major exports that will leave New Spain and go back to Europe.